the affair next door, my wife, my brother-in-law, and the quiet ambush. In emergencies, swift action is paramount. Cardiac arrest demands immediate chest compressions to oxygenate the brain until emergency medical services arrive to defibrillate the heart and restore its rhythm. Stopping bleeding takes precedence over addressing a broken bone. I sat on my patio, utterly bewildered, paralyzed by the unexpected crisis. This was completely uncharted territory for me. I felt blindsided. As a critical care nurse, my observational skills were finely honed. I could detect the subtle signs of a patient's decline and react swiftly, often saving lives. Yet I'd completely missed the warning signs of my nearly 18-year marriage imploding. I hadn't initially set out to save it. The pain of its end had seemed the only logical outcome. After a period of reflection, however, I recognized the potential for collateral damage, the harm to innocent individuals if I directly targeted my unfaithful wife and her lover. I took a sip of beer, contemplating my options. My backyard stretched from the patio to the bayou, sparsely dotted with trees. My house, a traditional design incorporating modern amenities, was a cherished gift from my father and grandfather, presented to me upon my engagement. The land itself had been in my family for generations. The house was built by our family's construction company. I had opted for a nursing career over joining the family business, a decision that initially disappointed my father, though he eventually came around. Despite this, I could afford certain luxuries: a boat, fishing gear, occasional family vacations. Family was my priority, and now their well-being was jeopardized. Across the yard, I saw my sister's nearly identical house. I called her over. We needed to talk. "Isn't it a little early for a drink, Rob? It's only 2 p.m., Susan said, noticing my beer. "I'm off for the weekend and in the mood," I replied. She understood my work schedule allowed for frequent time off. I preferred keeping a cooler of beer handy to avoid constant trips to the refrigerator. Offering her a drink, she sat down. "So what's so urgent?" Susan asked. "You told me not to call anyone before talking to you." "I found out Bonnie's cheating on me," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you sure?" "Maybe it's a cruel joke," she asked. I nodded. An irrefutable video was attached to the email. "Who sent it?" "I don't know," I replied. The email said, "You should know your wife is cheating. Here's proof." The sender was clearly furious. $9.99, Susan muttered, her fury palpable. "That cheating cow! Doesn't she know you'll destroy her and her lover? Do you know who the guy is?" I nodded, ready to answer, but she cut me off. "If Rich ever cheated on me, I'd destroy him. How does Bonnie even find the time for an affair? She's home almost every night except for bachelorette parties where I'm always present." "She works with Rich, and they usually drive together. He would notice if she was having an affair." Susan paused, noticing my shocked expression. "No way," she exclaimed. "She's cheating with my husband. They're cheating on us. With each other." Her face flushed, tears welling up. "I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you gently," I said, hugging her. "I've had a couple of hours to calm down enough not to grab a weapon," she sobbed briefly before regaining her composure. "Okay, what do we do? Wait for them and then confront them?" "I love him, but I'm not tolerating this. We need to be smart," I said. "Act normal tonight, just like yesterday. We'll greet them with a kiss." Susan frowned. "Are you serious? We need a plan. We'll get legal advice tomorrow." "At least we know we haven't contracted any STDs," I added with a smirk to lighten the mood. Susan pointed at me. "Hell no! I didn't even consider that. You know me, I might joke about becoming a TV star, but I'd never actually do it." She finished her beer and tossed the can. I handed her another. "And just for the record, I'm not doing anything with Rich. I just got my period," she laughed. "This will last until we confront those cheaters. He ain't getting anything from me. Bonnie can have him. and we mustn't let the kids know yet, I warned. They'd left for their grandparents' house that morning. They took their time leaving, but there were no arguments or questions. They simply got into Jason's car and drove off. The kids, my son, Jason, 17, Rob, 16, Dave and Cindy, 16, and my daughter, Deirdre, 16, had spent the entire summer together. They were more like siblings than cousins, especially during the pandemic when they were inseparable. Rich had been a good father and uncle, involved in the children's education and activities. I handled the outdoor fun, teaching them camping, fishing, and hunting. We'd camp in the backyard, gradually venturing deeper into the swamp as the children grew older. They joined in on fishing trips, often with Rich or Susan driving the second boat. Recently, Rich had let his sons handle his boat while he stayed home. The kids were learning to be self-reliant, providing their own food on trips and working together as a team. They were tough, and they valued family and teamwork. 3 weeks ago, I'd rearranged my work schedule to get 6 consecutive days off. I took the girls in one boat and the boys in another. We traveled slowly to avoid snags and shallow water, stopping occasionally so everyone could take turns driving. We spent a week at the old Poe fish camp, fishing and catching crabs. We bonded as a family, or so I thought. Apparently, Bonnie and Rich didn't share the same values regarding family unity. The thought of telling the children about Bonnie and Rich's affair was heartbreaking. Family was everything to me, and destroying that unity would be unforgivable. I expressed this to Susan. "We can't hide it from them," she said, "but we can delay it a bit. I'll make sure they don't know anything is wrong." "What do we do next? I can't forgive or forget infidelity no matter what Bonnie says," I replied. Susan agreed. "I can tolerate a lot, but not cheating. I need to figure out how to get rid of her without losing everything. I won't risk jail or let her take the kids. I can't hurt Rich either. I have to be there for the kids." I opened another beer. "I get it. We need to break him financially. I'm going to take every penny I can get. Child support, alimony, everything." "I agree. Rich earns more, so Susan has a better chance." Bonnie could drive me to the pen, as courts often favor women in divorce cases. In my job, I handle trusts and wills, but I know enough about the law to say our assets are protected. Susan said, "Our houses are safe. Dad gave them to us before we married, so Bonnie and Rich can't claim them. Bonnie might try to stay in your house until the kids are grown, but she can't claim it." "Didn't you and Bonnie sign a prenup?" Dad insisted. "It said if either party cheated, they'd only get 20% of joint assets and no alimony. Bonnie's father, a wealthy plastic surgeon, had insisted on the prenup. He wasn't thrilled when I got his daughter pregnant, fearing I'd take half his fortune. My father also made Susan and Rich sign a similar agreement." "I'm worried about that video of Rich and Bonnie," Susan said. "Who filmed it and how?" "There were at least 3 cameras," I said. "The video I got showed the same event from different angles, suggesting it wasn't edited. Yet neither Rich nor Bonnie seemed to know they were being recorded. Susan insisted I show her the video on my tablet. "Holy crap!" she exclaimed. Rich and Bonnie's comments in the video about how Susan and I were clueless infuriated her. "Rich is done, but we need to find out who made the video. I don't want it coming back to haunt us." "I don't care if the world sees it, as long as it doesn't affect us," I agreed, suggesting we hold off on a public reaction. Susan sat silently, pondering our next steps, then began to sob. I hugged her and we both cried, unable to hide our pain any longer. That night, I met Bonnie at the door, hugging and kissing her. I half expected her to pull away, but she kissed me back. I couldn't detect any trace of aftershave, just her perfume. Despite my anger, I told her dinner was ready. Susan and I had already planned takeout. Neither of us wanted to cook. We joked about poisoning our spouses, but it was a way to vent, not a real option. The next morning, I watched Bonnie get into Rich's car. I called Susan. "How'd it go?" "No problem," she replied, already joking and planning. "Help me keep my cool. Any idea where they're going tonight?" Susan, always a bit of a loose cannon, needed to vent. We had to be honest about our feelings. At 10 a.m., we were in the office of one of Susan's bosses, Jake, a divorce attorney and an old friend. He agreed to represent us. "Are you sure you have a video showing both parties?" he asked. We assured him we did, but chose not to show it yet. "As long as you have evidence of infidelity, you're good. Your prenuptial agreements are strict. Rob, did you consult a lawyer before signing?" I explained that my father insisted on a legal opinion, and Susan used the same document. Jake continued, "The cheater only gets 20% of joint assets, including savings and investments. There are no provisions for personal income accounts." "Do either of you have any hidden income?" We shook our heads. "What if Bonnie has money she didn't tell me about?" I asked. "Common property," Jake replied. "Like if you bought something without telling her. Home improvements can be tricky. Your homes are protected because they were gifted before marriage, but things like solar panels might be considered common property. So she only gets 20% because she's a cheater, right?" I asked. "I'm willing to give her that. We can negotiate the division of furniture and other items. She'll have to pay for transportation and storage if she wants to take anything." Jake grinned. "These are the games we'll play. The important thing is your ironclad prenups. As long as you prove infidelity, keep the video copies hidden and confidential. If they sue over the video being public, it depends on how it was obtained. Be careful." He emphasized the need for discretion. Susan and I nodded. We had considered editing the video and sharing it with our friends and family, but we were worried about the impact on our children. Now we were more determined to find out who filmed it. We decided to serve the divorce papers on Thursday at noon, but I suggested waiting until Friday afternoon so they would have to worry all weekend without legal advice. Jake convinced us to stick with Thursday, saying it would save costs and still keep them busy with financial statements all weekend, likely increasing their legal fees. Initially, we wanted to serve them in person to watch their reactions, but Jake advised against it. Instead, we decided to serve them at work, in front of their colleagues. After leaving Jake's office, we went to the bank to transfer money into new accounts in our names only, ensuring we had statements for all accounts. We paid off and canceled credit cards, opening new ones in our names only. I checked my email and found 3 more videos of Bonnie and Rich. I thanked the sender and asked how they got the videos, expressing concern about them going public. Secretly, I wished they would be released, but knew we had to be cautious to avoid a lawsuit. An hour later, I received an email with an address, 9203 Victoria Street, apartment 2011. I visited the address and convinced the woman at the counter to give me information by implying the tenant was involved in criminal activities. She gave me the details. The apartment was rented by the insurance company where Rich and Bonnie worked, with Rich's signature on the contract. I wondered how the company would react if they found out they were paying for Rich's affair. Bonnie called me at 12:30, furious about the divorce papers. I calmly told her I knew she'd found someone else and was setting her free. We had rehearsed our responses. Bonnie angrily denied the affair, accusing me of believing rumors and threatening to take everything in the divorce, including custody of the kids, child support, and half of our assets. She suggested Rich could move in with her, and I could live with Susan, imagining what they were doing in my house. "Go ahead," I said. "Get yourself a lawyer." I barely kept my voice steady, struggling with the regret of my marriage falling apart and anger at her stubborn denial. I hoped Susan hadn't revealed too much to Rich. "By the way, the girls are packing your things," Susan texted. "Susan told the boys to pack Rich's. Everything will be in front of the house for you to pick up this afternoon. We got a restraining order and changed the locks this morning. You'll have to find another place to stay until the court decides." Bonnie started yelling, so I hung up. 10 minutes later, Susan texted, "Backyard. Bring your cooler. Make sure it's full." That fool Rich. She began sipping her beer. He tried to blame it on some secretary's gossip. I told him Bonnie did the same. He denied everything, said we shouldn't believe it. I told him to get his stuff. Really, yes. I told him to call first because I had a loaded weapon. Jake will be here soon with 2 sheriff's deputies to keep things from getting out of hand. I realized having deputies present was smart. Rich might provoke me, and I could end up in jail for assault. I was already in a controlled panic mode like during emergencies. Susan continued. I'm glad you talked to the kids earlier. I couldn't have done it without breaking down. We gathered the kids and I told them what was happening. Surprisingly, they seemed to expect it and started packing Bonnie and Rich's stuff. Susan said, the kids took it surprisingly well. Maybe they're in shock or don't realize how it will affect them. My phone beeped with an email. I wonder if it's from Pissed Off 999, I said. Check it, Susan insisted. She showed me how to open it, and we listened to an audio file. Can you believe Robert and Susan served us? Bonnie said. They must have found out somehow. I can't believe this. Just last night, Robert was so affectionate. Relax, Rich replied. They don't know anything. Someone must have gossiped about us having lunch or driving together. We need to deny everything. If they go through with this divorce, we'll make them pay. I know a lawyer who will help us. Just don't admit anything. Act like everything you say is being recorded. After listening, Susan and I were silent. Okay, let them think we don't know anything, I said. Rich mentioned they'd been planning something for a long time. We needed to ensure we were protected if they did something illegal. Susan nodded, tears in her eyes. We have to hold firm, I said. I know, Susan said quietly. Jake said I'm in a better position. Courts favor women, but I can't accept Bonnie getting custody of Jason and Deirdre and living in your house until Deirdre turns 18, even with the prenup. It's terrible if she lives rent-free while you pay child support. I felt the same, but hugged Susan as she cried. I assured her we would come out victorious, though I wasn't sure. Divorce is about minimizing losses. The children were silent as Susan and I entered the house. Deirdre and Cindy were packing Bonnie's clothes into suitcases and bags, now using plastic garbage bags. I asked them to take pictures of the luggage, planning to apply its value to Bonnie's share of the assets. Next door, the boys were almost done. Rich had fewer clothes, and the boys were stuffing them into bags rather than folding them. I smiled as Rob stuffed a $2,000 suit into a bag. They had my back. Bonnie texted me, and I called Jake, who showed up with 2 sheriff's deputies. Jake told me to relax and enjoy. Bonnie and Rich arrived with another familiar face, Budrow Landry, a bully from elementary school. Hey, Robert, Budrow smirked. I hear you're having trouble with your wife and son-in-law. No big deal. If I had a weapon, I would have shot him. Budrow was huge, and fighting him wasn't an option. Hey, Budrow, I said. We're just trying to work it out. You don't seriously think my boy Rich is with your wife, do you? Budrow asked, grinning. That's the story, I said. Jake moved closer. I can't deal with it. Bonnie accused me of taking all the money from our bank account. Yes, and I have statements showing the original amounts. You'll get what you're owed. She didn't know her credit card would no longer work. Susan and I didn't accompany Rich and Bonnie into the house. Deirdre and Cindy followed Bonnie and a deputy, ensuring nothing funny happened. Jason and Rob followed Rich. Where's my jewelry? Bonnie asked. This was a major point of contention over the years. I bought her high-quality jewelry worth at least $25,000. Most of it was locked in my safe. I took pictures of Bonnie's ring and necklace for insurance purposes. I wanted proof of ownership. Budrow started to argue but stopped when I explained I took pictures to prevent the jewelry from going missing. Jake stepped in, suggesting a new appraisal of all assets. After consulting with Budrow, Bonnie calmly removed her jewelry and handed it to me. Where am I supposed to go? Bonnie asked. I nearly suggested her love nest on Victoria Street but held back. I shrugged, realizing my emotions had shifted. Days ago, I loved this woman. Now I felt nothing but anger and coldness toward her. Bonnie and Rich finally left, with Budrow following. I wondered if they were heading to the apartment. Jake smiled. I hope so. We have someone following them. If we reveal the apartment now, it will help our negotiations. Instead, they went to the Holiday Inn near their office. Cheerfully, I helped them move their things inside. I needed more flash drives for backups of the audio and video files. Susan and the girls were making dinner when my phone beeped with another email. Susan followed me to the computer. Okay, guys, Bud's voice said. Someone's probably following Robert. Stay at a motel and get a room with 2 beds. Make sure both beds look used. The investigator can bribe the maid to check. We'll say you're sharing a room to save money. It was embarrassing when my card was declined, Rich said. Good thing I took extra cash. What's next? I'll call the credit card company to open a new account. Robert thought about jewelry. Budrow continued. He likely has a list. Protect any hidden assets. Legally, they're community property, but what Robert and Susan don't know about, they can't claim. Don't hide too much. You might get caught. If you have a secret bank account, make sure it holds only a small amount. Offshore accounts are better. You don't want to be caught lying under oath. Now what? Bonnie asked. They can find our Baton Rouge accounts, Rich exclaimed. We'll fly to the Cayman Islands and open an account there. Make the room look used, wet the tissues, ruffle the towels, wet the shower, and use some shampoo. I'll call the office and say we're off tomorrow. The audio file ended. Do they have secret bank accounts? Susan sighed. Where did the money come from? I see the bank statements. He couldn't have hidden much. I felt bad, too. Bonnie and I got $50 weekly for travel cash, and we both reviewed the credit card statements monthly. I told the apartment woman Rich was into pills and cortisone as a bluff, but now I wondered, could he be hiding something more? We decided to leave it for tonight, joining the kids for dinner. There wasn't much we could do about hidden bank accounts anyway. The next morning, I drove to Jake's office, having arranged a jewelry appraisal and an estimate for my firearms from a local dealer. Susan went to work briefly, and we met at Jake's office, where I played the audio files from the previous day. I'd like to know who's sending these, Jake said. How they bugged Bonnie and Rich in the hotel is beyond me. A private investigator couldn't have done it that fast. We might need a judge's order to find their bank account balances, which could mean hiring an investigator. Susan and I shook our heads when asked if we had noticed missing money. If you want this divorce quickly, like you said, we'll move fast. Next week, we'll meet with Bonnie, Rich, and their lawyer to list assets, then go before a judge. Louisiana's Napoleonic laws make divorce easier, especially with proven infidelity. Counseling won't help. Once the judge rules, you'll wait 6 months and it's over, Jake added. Budrow called, demanding I release an extra 30% of the money I withdrew. I reminded him the prenup states the cheater only gets 20% of assets. He demanded proof of infidelity, which we'll present in court. It was amusing to see him flounder. I'd love to get an audio tape of him advising hiding money offshore into the courtroom. I had to work that weekend. The head nurse, Sharon, couldn't cover my shifts. What if I start coughing and need a COVID test? I asked. Idiot, Sharon said affectionately. Yes, you could fill in. You have vacation and sick days saved up. Take an emergency vacation if needed. I can't believe Bonnie did this to you. How about I work this weekend and start my vacation on Monday? I suggested. Really? Thank you. I owe you one, Sharon said. I'll start your sick leave and then vacation. Take as much as you need and keep me posted. Working was a welcome relief. Weekends were busy, but ICU staff had to stay alert. I was surprised to see my father-in-law, Dr. Prawn, waiting for me at the nurses' station. Hello, Dr. Prawn. What brings you to the ICU? I greeted him, knowing the staff would be curious. Cut the crap "And let's talk," he hissed in the head nurse's office. He asked, "What's this about you kicking Bonnie out? She called her mother sobbing." "John, I found out Bonnie is having an affair," I said bluntly. "She's cheating on me with my sister's husband. I'm dealing with a family crisis." "It was a rumor started by gossipers at the office," said John. "They commute together and often have lunch together. She told us the rumors about an affair with her boss were just that, rumors." I decided to be open with him, despite our history. "I haven't told anyone except my lawyer and my sister. I haven't even told Bonnie and Rich everything I know, let alone the kids," I said, holding back my emotions. "I have proof, video and audio files. This isn't just a rumor." Dr. Prawn looked shocked. "What are you going to do?" he asked softly, already knowing the answer. "What can I do?" I replied. "I'm trying to protect the kids, but I can't just ignore this, John. What would you do if Bonnie had proof I was cheating?" "I'd want your head on a platter. I'd help her bury you," he said honestly, tears welling in his eyes. "What about Jason and Deirdre? How are they handling it?" he asked. "They're talking more with their cousins and each other than with Susan or me. They seem to be holding up, but they're angry with Bonnie. I told them they need to talk to her, but I don't know if they have. I'm not getting involved in this." "I thought you were overreacting to gossip," JN said softly. "My first priority is to protect Jason and Deirdre." I nodded. "And I'll help Bonnie with her physical needs. I don't excuse her behavior, but if you have irrefutable proof, I accept it." "And stay in touch. You're an honorable man." He walked out, his shoulders slumped. I felt more sorry for him than for Bonnie. "Wow," Susan said when I got home. "So he knows his daughter isn't so virtuous." "We need to tell Mom and Dad soon," I said. "How about tomorrow night after your shift? We don't want them to be mad at us for keeping them in the dark." I agreed. The meeting wasn't pleasant. My father only asked if I had proof, and I assured him I did. Like John, he was more concerned about the kids than us, which I understood. In our culture, children came first, and adults dealt with the consequences of their actions. Children were protected, but informed to learn. I received no additional information from my mysterious benefactor, which was fine. I had 4 explicit videotapes showing Bonnie and Rich, along with audio recordings proving their long-term affair. I didn't need more proof. Bonnie not only cheated, but also financially defrauded the family. The mystery of how she saved enough to fly to the Cayman Islands infuriated me. She was a thief and a fraud. Jake began investigating their accounts, using social security numbers, ensuring we could subpoena statements if the money was missing. Some questions were answered the following Wednesday when we met to list our total assets. A court-appointed financial arbitrator reviewed the paperwork. I provided my annual salary and Bonnie's pay stub. Bonnie made $5,000 a month, and my salary varied with overtime, but we earned similar amounts annually, Jake said. This would allow for minimal alimony, even without the prenup and infidelity proof. On Monday, the auditor requested income tax returns for the past few years. I found them in our desk while Susan had to get copies from her accountant. She was upset that Rich hadn't filed them with other documents. She knew Rich earned about $80,000 compared to her $50,000 and was pleased when Jake said she'd likely get a sizable maintenance payment. Budrow entered the conference room with a sullen Rich and Bonnie. Bonnie glared at me, her anger surprising me. I expected an apology, but she remained silent, likely on Budrow's advice. Rich struggled to maintain a neutral expression. The court officer introduced himself and his assistant, who took notes and kept an electronic record. "Let's get started," the auditor began. "Your attorneys have forms for you to sign, confirming that your statements today are true and may be admitted into evidence. Our goal is to compile a list of all assets and income for the judge to review. We won't discuss prenuptial agreements today. Regarding car valuation, we'll use the standard Blue Book. If the car your child drives is registered in your name, we can consider it separate from community property if both parties agree. We'll get to the money later. Let's start with Mr. and Mrs. Fontano, listing automobiles, firearms, the boat, and household goods. Listing automobiles, firearms, the boat, and household goods took only a few minutes. Even Bonnie's jewelry wasn't a problem. I had it appraised, and its value exceeded that of my truck and firearms combined. Budrow insisted the solar system be considered separately and prepared a document stating its value and depreciation. Jake reviewed it, made a few notes, and nodded. The 401k accounts were listed. Why? I asked, thinking they should be excluded. No, they count since you've been married over 10 years, Jake replied. But in your case, the values are similar, so it's not a big issue. We then reviewed the checking and savings accounts. Jake entered the statements, showing I had taken 80% of the funds and did the same for Susan and Rich. It's straightforward, said the auditor. Mr. Jacobs, there's a big discrepancy between Mrs. Fontano's salary estimate and her tax returns for the last 2 years. Rich tensed up. I've estimated each of you earned $60,000, I explained. I multiplied her monthly salary by 12 to... Yes, but for the last 2 years, Mrs. Fontano reported an income of $140,000 annually. My incredulous, "What the hell?" made the assistant frown. Didn't you look at your tax return? He asked. I shook my head and explained that Bonnie and Rich had a new accountant handle our taxes electronically. I just looked at the small refund we got. Bonnie turned purple. Her salary includes $80,000 in bonuses each year, Mr. Jacobs said. I looked at Budrow, and Mr. Jenkins got $110,000 in bonuses each year, Jacobs continued. Susan asked how much extra that was. Net about $80,000 a year, totaling about $160,000, Jacobs replied. So where's the money, Bonnie? I demanded. Is that why you went to the Cayman Islands last Friday to hide it? Bonnie angrily asked, How did you find out? Are you following me? She then composed herself. No, I didn't need to, I said. You did it yourself. Both you and Susan insisted the kids install phone locator apps. Jason and Deirdre used it to track you when you didn't answer them on Friday. They saw you reappear near the coast, suggesting you were in the Cayman Islands. Bonnie and Rich looked astonished. They checked your office on Monday and saw you weren't home, but in Baton Rouge, likely transferring money into new accounts, I added. Jake spoke up. Budrow, we can get statements to prove those account balances. It's illegal to hide money offshore to avoid distributing joint assets. Your clients flew to the Cayman Islands right after hiring you. Hiding assets like this is a felony. Bonnie began to cry, and even Rich looked scared. Budrow's face turned pale, then red. I didn't do anything like that, he declared, looking at the recorder and Jacob's assistant typing away. Susan asked Jake, Can we get them to return the money? Jake nodded. Yes, we'd get our share in the end, even if we have to confiscate their paychecks. 80% of those accounts will become yours once infidelity is proven in court. But there's no money left, exclaimed Bonnie. It disappeared when we tried to transfer it. Rich tried to silence her, but she continued. I think you stole it, she accused me. I looked at her incredulously. I didn't know for sure about the money until recently. I suspected it, but I had no idea of the amounts. What are you claiming now? Did you spend it all or lose it? Both are nonsense, she said. She explained that they tried to transfer the money electronically at the bank in Grand Cayman, but the transfer was denied. They then went to Baton Rouge to investigate. The online statement showed the transfer, but no routing number or account details. Provide me with the bank information for the Baton Rouge account and I will investigate, said Mr. Jacobs. I can get the results faster and enter them into the court documents. Rich and Bonnie left the room looking dejected. Susan wondered where the money went, and I shrugged, sharing her thoughts. Our case was expedited. likely because Bonnie and Rich had begged Budrow to speed things up. They stayed at the Holiday Inn for a week before moving to the apartment on Victoria Street. It amused me to think about them in their love nest, likely struggling with cash flow and Budrow's fees. All 5 children insisted on attending the hearing, and I agreed, since they were affected by the divorce. Jake explained what to expect. Judge Goody conducted his hearing semi-formally, sitting at the table with us. Jake, Susan, and I sat to Budrow's left with Rich and Bonnie across from us. The kids sat in the gallery, following Jake's lead. We stood as the judge entered. He waved for us to sit. "I handle family cases in a semi-formal setting," he explained. "Sit and speak when I address you. Raise your hand if you want to speak. Be on your best behavior and respectful. If you piss me off, I'll throw you out. Understood?" The kids managed to hold back their laughter at his last statement. "Well, I've reviewed both cases," the judge continued. "Normally we treat these as separate matters, but the evidence and parties involved are the same here. A sibling is accused of infidelity in Louisiana. While infidelity alone isn't grounds for divorce, there are prenuptial agreements that affect property distribution in such cases. Therefore, I'll need irrefutable evidence of infidelity first. There were discrepancies regarding monetary assets, with allegations of hiding funds. My investigation shows Mrs. Fontano and Mr. Jenkins have bank accounts in Baton Rouge with balances of $120,000 and $160,000, respectively. The entire balance was transferred from these accounts the Monday before the divorce petition was filed. The correct passwords and security questions were used, indicating the transfers were made by Mrs. Fontano and Mr. Jenkins, or someone they authorized. Further investigation revealed the money was split evenly among 5 accounts belonging to their children: Jason and Deirdre Fontano, and Robert, Dave, and Cynthia Jenkins. These transfers are legal under the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. The accounts were set up years ago, likely for college or income in the event of a parent's passing away. I was stunned. Why was Bonnie making such a fuss if she had given the money to her children? The judge continued. The parents showed responsibility, if not remorse, by giving the money to their children. Such deposits are non-refundable unless fraud is proven. Does anyone have proof of fraud? I was thrilled. While I would have liked my 80% knowing the money was divided among the children was satisfying. Rich and Bonnie looked shocked, suspecting we had outsmarted them. When Judge Goody asked if we had proof of fraud, we all shook our heads and said, "No, Your Honor." They seemed terrified of possible charges for hiding money overseas. None of them appeared willing to rebut the judge's remarks. "The next matter is the establishment of custody of the minor children," the judge said. My daughter, Deirdre, raised her hand. "Yes, Your Honor," she said. "I read that children 15 and older can choose which parent to live with." "In some states, yes," Judge Goody replied. "In Louisiana, I consider the children's opinions after speaking to them privately." Deirdre stood and stated, "I don't need to talk privately. My mother cheated on my father and our entire family. I want to live with my dad." Jason stood up and agreed. Robert, Dave, and Cindy also stood, stating they wanted to live with their mother for the same reason. My heart raced under the table as I squeezed Susan's hand. "I will consider your wishes," Judge Goody said with a half smile, "but it hasn't yet been established that there was, as you put it, treason." Deirdre raised her hand again, and the judge turned to her. "I also read that a 16-year-old can petition the court for emancipation, and 17-year-olds can leave home without a petition." "Yes," the judge replied. "The 17-year-old rule is an old law for young men wanting to enlist in the military without parental consent. For a 16-year-old to petition for emancipation, they must be able to support themselves. Is that clear?" Deirdre nodded. "I have a college fund with another $56,000 added to it, plus what my parents and grandparents contributed. Cindy stood up. Me too. Collectively, they had plenty of money to live on their own for a long time. Her brother Dave stood and smiled. Me too. We could rent a nice place together. Jason and Rob stood up and said that if they pooled their money, all five could live fine on their own. I glanced at the judge, who seemed to suppress a laugh. Let me guess, he said. If I don't go along with your wishes, you'll all petition for emancipation or leave on your own? The five heads nodded. Sit down, he commanded. I'll consider what you said. There's an allegation of infidelity in this case, which affects the prenuptial agreement and property distribution, so I'm going to ask for evidence of infidelity. Jake stood up. Your Honor, I have these pictures of Richard Jenkins and Bonnie Fontano together. Budrow objected. Anyone can alter photos. I have a picture of me shaking hands with the president and another of us playing golf made by my son, he said. It's a joke. Defense counsel hasn't identified the source of this evidence, Judge Goody observed, looking at Jake, then at Susan and me. Jake nodded for me to respond. Your Honor, I said, the evidence came from an anonymous source. I received several video and audio files and took these screenshots from one of the videos. I have the full video on a DVD and thumb drive. I looked at Rich and Bonnie, who appeared shocked and agitated, shaking their heads in disbelief. Judge Goody observed their reactions, noting their purple faces in clear distress. Okay, he said. Do I need to reproduce the file Mr. Fontano provided, or do all parties agree that infidelity occurred? Budrow wanted to see the footage, but when Bonnie and Rich quickly pleaded with the judge not to show the video, he backtracked. Could you spare a minute for my clients, Your Honor? He said after consulting with them reluctantly. We agree with the plaintiff's claims? Well, in that case, I will announce my verdict, said Judge Goody. Since all parties agree infidelity occurred, the marriage contracts will be honored in each case. Susan and I were awarded 80% of the community property. Judge Goody suggested we discuss the actual distribution with our attorneys to avoid court involvement in the details. For custodial parents, I grant Robert Fontano full custody of Jason and Deirdre Fontano, and Susan Jenkins custody of Cynthia, Robert, and David Jenkins as requested. The non-custodial parents have full visitation rights. Legally, the divorce will be finalized in 6 months. The increased incomes require Bonnie to pay me $1,000 a month and Rich to pay Susan $2,000 a month for the next 3 years. Each dependent child will receive $500 a month until they turn 18. Jake said the payments were minimal and suggested we could appeal, but I decided against it, and Susan followed my lead. After the judge ended the hearing, we left. Jake said he would arrange a meeting to work out property distribution details. I told the kids to go home, change, and wait for me for a family meeting. Susan and I walked to the back of the courtroom where my father was waiting. So when did you figure it out, Dad? I asked. Susan looked puzzled. It hit me when Deirdre and Cindy made those comments about the video, I said to Susan, pissed off. 999 is a personality the kids invented. Susan's mouth dropped open. No, Dad said. I figured it out a few days ago when I saw an old credit card bill. Jason and Rob asked me 2 months ago for a credit card to plan something special for your anniversary. They promised to reimburse me about $500. The statement showed a purchase from an electronics company. Initially, I didn't pay attention, but when I called the company, they revealed the kids bought cell phone bugs. The kids spent $500 on spy devices? I asked. Yes, Dad said. Apparently, they were expensive. I didn't know where they got the video cameras. He followed me home to find out more. All 5 children were waiting in the living room. They fell silent as we walked in. Go to the kitchen and sit down, I said. Susan grabbed 3 beers, handing one to Dad and me. Jason and Rob held out their hands, grinning. You may be old enough to be spies, but not old enough to drink, I said. They shrugged, knowing I wasn't angry. Okay, who wants to start? Let's begin at the beginning, I said. It all started when Cindy and I stopped by my mom's office and she wasn't there, Deirdre began. Neither was Uncle Rich. This was around the time they began phase 2 of the COVID lockdown. We thought we could get some money from one of them to see a movie. The receptionist said they were out and had left long ago. It was well past lunchtime, so we decided to track them. You know, we have a locator feature my mom insisted on installing on our phones. It showed they were at a strange address, so we checked it out. It was an apartment building. When we arrived, we saw Uncle Rich's car and waited. They came out later, walking hand in hand and smiling. That got us thinking, so we started tracking where they went. For 3 days straight, they returned to the same place and stayed for about an hour and a half each time. Sometimes they went there late at night after work, but before going home, we told the boys about it. Rob continued. We searched the internet and found bugs you can insert into cell phones after downloading an app. It works like a continuous phone call in the background and doesn't interfere with regular calls. It does drain the battery a bit faster. It transmits all the sounds around the phone so you can eavesdrop. We talked Pop into letting us use his credit card to buy them. Sorry, we lied a bit, Pop. Installing the bugs and the app on their phones was easy. They took turns checking them and eavesdropping on conversations. They recorded anything interesting to share later. So that's clear with the audio recordings, but how did you get the video and find out which apartment they used? I asked. We looked at their keys, Deirdre explained. They both had a key marked 2011. That's not their office number, so Jason copied his mom's key. We went into the apartment a couple of times and looked around. We decided we needed cameras. Dave added, "That was pretty cool." The boy was excited about the technology. He didn't notice he was describing the end of several marriages and the breakup of 2 families, at least. Susan and I got some answers. The cameras were motion sensitive, so they didn't burn too many batteries, Deirdre continued. We hid the receiver under the couch. The receiver got information from the cameras and transmitted it to our receiver. We recorded it. It seemed simple. So you took a video of Bonnie and Rich doing it? You also recorded audio files and sent some to me? I spoke carefully. These were my kids, my nephews and nieces. I couldn't ruin my relationship with them, but there was another issue. Money, Dad, Deirdre stated. When Cindy and I first looked at that apartment, I realized our mom was gone. Well, not gone, but not back to where our family used to be. They had clothes stashed away and Mom had some outfits I recognized. She had a makeup kit, towels, and washcloths, too. We knew what they were doing. They'd work out, clean up, and then come home to you and Aunt Sue like nothing had happened. We were all furious. They weren't just cheating on you and Aunt Sue, they were cheating us. Now, about the money, Cindy said. The secret bank accounts were a side issue. When we looked around the apartment, we found some bank account papers. There were instructions on how to access it online. It took a while to find the actual accounts. We even spent time in Dad and Aunt Bonnie's offices, peeking in on them a couple of times. The receptionist let us in to wait for them, she giggled. We looked through a bunch of folders and finally found one in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk with some applications. Then we looked in Aunt Bonnie's office and found more papers. Aunt Bonnie had a small notebook in her purse with passwords and stuff in it. It didn't say secret bank account, but we could tell the password was unusual, much more so than the one she uses for her cell phone. And it worked. It took a while, but eventually we realized it was the right password. They were using the same password for both accounts. Jason took control of the situation. We already knew they were up to something shady when we discovered their hidden bank accounts. We got really angry. We wondered if they were dealing pills or embezzling money. Dave was the one who came up with the idea of putting money in our accounts. Dave blushed. Actually, I said, we can't let Dad and Aunt Bonnie get rich and leave us hanging. We read about dividing assets in a divorce, and we didn't like the idea of them keeping half the money either. We had accounts set up by powwow, and I thought maybe we should take all the money. I thought the cops might catch us, But since we were minors and it was our parents' money, we wouldn't get in serious trouble. We thought it might work, so we did it. If we'd known about the 80-20 share, we probably wouldn't have taken it," Deirdre said regretfully. "It actually worked out better that way," I said, looking around the table. I was at least a little relieved to see an expression of restraint rather than outright pride. "And then you guys started sending me video and audio files," I said, looking around the table. "That was the hardest part," Jason said quietly. "We were really mad at Mom and Uncle Rich for what they were doing to all of us. We didn't want to hurt you and Aunt Sue, but we couldn't do anything, so we sent you that first video. We kept trying to get you to visit Mom and Dad. We knew you were upset. If you pulled a weapon out of the safe, we would have told you everything. We knew you'd tell Aunt Sue. We kind of moved on. We already moved the money that Mom hid. I think we stole it. Well, I know we stole it, but we figured they cheated us, so it was only fair. I hope you and Aunt Sue weren't too upset." I looked at Susan, who had a look of amazement on her face. "From the start," I said with a smile, "I hope you kids never get mad at me and Sue. But if you ever nail me like you did your mother and Rich, I'll punch you, even if it's with my walker in a nursing home." They all chuckled at my threat. "You'll never have to worry about that, Daddy," Deirdre said. "You'll never let the family down. We'll always stick together." "One thing I don't understand," my dad said. "You bought cell phone bugs with my credit card. They were awfully expensive. Where did you get the money for the video cameras?" "Yeah," I said. "They cost about $500 for each camera because they shot full video with sound and had built-in motion and sound detectors. We got 5 of them," replied Jason, "plus another $500 each for a hidden transmitter that sent a signal to a receiver we hooked up to Deirdre's computer. That's a total of $3,500. Plus shipping, but we can recoup half that cost if we return the package undamaged. We'd already removed all the cameras and the transmitter. We probably lost the cell phone bugs, though. Regarding the credit card, we used Dad's Visa. I didn't have one, so I applied for my own and forged your signature," Jason admitted. "At least he was honest enough to not feign innocence. It has a $10,000 limit, and we receive mail daily, making it easy to conceal." Cindy and I also set up an email account, PissedOff999. Rob came up with that name. He said what Mom and Uncle Rich did enraged him. The kids smiled and nodded in agreement. Susan, Dad, and I were quite impressed by their resourcefulness. "The bugs in the cell phones remain active?" I asked Dave. He nodded. "Yes, they function as long as the cell phone batteries are charged. Thanks to that and the phone location app, we know where they are and what they're doing at all times," Dave explained, visibly relieved they weren't in actual trouble. "If one of them is talking on their cell phone, we can hear them. It's voice-activated, so it's mostly car sounds and business conversations. We took turns reviewing the files to extract anything important. I insisted on access to the audio recordings. As a result, Susan and I possessed advanced knowledge of Bonnie and Rich's demands going into the property division meeting. Bonnie was so desperate to get her jewelry that she ceded most of the cash and all the housewares. We conceded some of their requests without much argument, but we made them squirm throughout the process. Susan shocked everyone, except me, when she suggested they walk across town wearing signs proclaiming our marital infidelities. The alternative was appealing the alimony and child support amounts. I thought Bud's eyes were going to bulge out of his head at that threat. We heard Budrow tell them they got off easy on the child support and warned them that Susan and I would likely appeal the amounts. Susan eventually retracted the suggestion, forcing both of them to apologize on their knees. I still don't know exactly how it happened, and I'm willing to swear on a stack of Bibles that I had nothing to do with it. Somehow, 2 months after our hearing, the insurance company where Bonnie and Rich worked discovered he'd been using company funds to rent an apartment for a clandestine affair. Although everyone in the office had received premiums for the past 2 years, Bonnie's premiums were inexplicably much higher than usual each year. Rich also managed to receive substantial bonuses, no one ever understood why. When this all came to light, both he and Bonnie were fired. It wasn't a major scandal. The company simply wanted to avoid any negative publicity. None of the videos ever surfaced online. Susan and I couldn't have cared less. We joked over beers that it would have been entertaining to make them internet stars. However, the kids didn't want to publicly humiliate themselves, and we understood their perspective. Bonnie and Rich now reside in New Orleans, working for a small shipping company. Since leaving town, they've barely visited the kids and rarely even call.
Last I heard, they're struggling to meet their child support and alimony obligations. I wish them well. Well, maybe not.